Welcome to the York912 Patriots meeting. I'm glad that you came. Got a little extra bounce in my step tonight because what happened in Wisconsin on Tuesday. I really think that that's the push that the conservative movement really needs to replace our president in November. And I think it might be the end of the union collective bargaining for the public positions. And I'm hoping that our governor, Corbett, would take up the cause and do the same thing. He has the wind at his back right now, and he has a lot of cover with the other governors doing the same thing. Governor Kasich, Governor Walker, Governor Christie, Governor McConnell, Governor, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. Governor Daniels. There's a lot of conservative governors out there that are doing the right thing and trying to get their states back on track. And that's all we have to do now is get the federal government back on track. So it's very important that we stay involved and we get out there and we help President Romney, slip of the tongue, nominee Romney. Mitt Romney was not my first choice as candidate, but he's the only choice right now because if you don't vote for Mitt Romney, if you stay home, it's a vote for Barack Obama, and that's what we do not need and we do not want. So I'm happy this week. We're finally starting to make some strides. We're starting to get some victories. It's been a long time coming, but it seems to be every election that seems to happen now is a referendum on Obama, and Obama's on the losing side on the majority of these elections. So that's a great thing. I want to tell you about some. I want to get into. Actually, before I get into that, I want to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I kind of jumped the gun with Scott Walker, but I had to get it off my chest. So let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And right now I'd like to introduce Reverend Jim Grove with Heritage Baptist Church. He's going to give our prayer for the evening.
Shall we bow? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this meeting here this evening. We thank you for it being arranged and ask that you'd give each one in a position to speak the wisdom that we need to understand these very crucial issues. Father, about the health care, Dr. Nick and David Ballinger, we ask, Lord, that you would give him a special wisdom to help convince us and convince those who are here of the bondage of property tax and how it has been a problem in Pennsylvania and the states all across this country. We ask that you would release us from this bondage. We ask that you should open the eyes of the legislators who are resistant to this and that we might gain the victory very soon concerning this issue of property tax. And we ask that your will be done here this evening. We thank you for our Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but by me. Again, have your will and your way, and we'll thank and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, and that's Pastor Jim Grove, not Reverend. I'm not sure why he said that. There really are no reverends in the Baptist church. So the next thing I'd like to talk about are the upcoming events. Adams County 912 Patriots have a meeting June 21st at Cross Keys Motor Inn. They're going to have Leo Nepper there with Cap. He was just here last month and very knowledgeable in state elections and candidates and things of that nature. June 22nd, which is Friday, we have the Rally for Religious Freedom, which is being held in the square in York City. That's Friday at 7 o'clock, and it's a peaceful rally to oppose the health care, the regulations from the health care bill about funding and things of that nature. Our Republican State Committee is meeting Saturday, June 23rd. That's up in Hershey, and the Central Caucus meeting, which is we're a part of, the Central Caucus, begins at 7:30. That runs to 8:30. The general meeting is from 9:30 to 11, and that's at the Hershey Lodge in Hershey. There's not a whole lot that goes on to the Republican State Committee meeting in June. Generally, the fall and the spring meetings are the most important to attend. Our next meeting, and please write this down on your calendars, is July 12th. It's not the first Thursday, it's the second Thursday, and it's a members-only meeting. And what that means is you have to be a member of the York912 Patriots to attend. And what we do during those meetings is we'll discuss the membership, we'll discuss our website, we'll discuss where we're going into the future, and some other things pertinent to the group. But we try and have 2 member meetings a year, and it's generally during the slower times of the year, the political season, July, and generally in December. And then, let me get a raise of hands of who's never been here before. So we have some people that have listened to the radio, and because we ran ads this week, but I want to invite everybody out to our 3rd annual anniversary picnic, which is going to be August 18th, and that'll be at the Warrington Township Municipal Park in Rossville, right up outside of Pinchot State Park. And that's a significant location because that's the first meeting that we've ever had 3 years ago with the York912 Patriots, and that's where it all began. So we'd love to have you come out. We'll have a covered dish. We'll have more information on that when we get closer to it, but that runs from 12 to 5, and we'll have more information on the website about that. So we want to invite everybody out to have a good time. There's a pavilion there. There's swing sets. There's a gym. There's a basketball court. There's a nature trail. There's all kinds of things there to do, and we'll have a good time there. The other thing I want to mention about the Scott Walker election, this upcoming election, is the fact that in 2008, we weren't around. There wasn't really a Tea Party in 2008. Things are going to change this year. Things have to change this year. I've been telling everybody that I'm really hopeful of changing the presidency this year because of all the conservative organizations out there. There's Americans for Prosperity, there's Freedom Works, Glenn Beck has gotten just bigger and bigger with his following, and the 912 groups and the local groups have become stronger and stronger, and I think that's what we need. And it's really telling that in the Scott Walker election that the Democrats are accusing the Republicans of buying elections. Which is not a thing you generally hear. It's generally the other way around, but that's a telling sign. So stay involved. And the other thing I want to ask you, how many times have you seen Senator Bob Casey in York County in the last 4 years? Has anybody seen Casey? I mean, Casey comes out when it's election season, and that's it. We have a person in the person of Bob Casey who doesn't show up. He votes 98% of the time with President Obama, and he needs to be changed also. And that leads me into our next speaker. Our next speaker is John McDonald. He is the Central PA coordinator for Tom Smith, who is the Republican nominee who's running against Bob Casey. I'd like to introduce John right now.
Thank you so much for having me. 1,135 days. That's how long this country has been without a budget. During the American Revolution, this country managed to have a budget. During the Civil War, we had a budget. During World War II, we had a budget. But now, for some reason, we don't have a budget. For 3 years, the Senate has not passed the budget, and Bob Casey has offered no solutions. He's voted against every budget, I believe, that it's been proposed. And during that time, our national debt has increased by $4.5 trillion. This election here in Pennsylvania for Senate is critical. Bob Casey has to go. And if you don't like Bob Casey, you have a good alternative. Tom Smith. Tom Smith is from Armstrong County, out west. He still lives on the farm that he was born on. If you don't know his story, When he was 19, his father had a heart attack and he had to postpone college and work the farm, and later went on to work in the mines of Pennsylvania. And eventually, after 20 years, he decided he wanted to be a business owner, and he set out, got investors, and bought his own mine. And from that, he created a large coal company using the free market system. If he's elected, he will repeal Obamacare, rein in out-of-control spending, end deficit spending, and finally vote to pass a budget. The differences in this election could not be greater. Scott gave a pretty good description of Bob Casey, but Bob Casey has worked hard on one thing. During Obamacare, Bob Casey said he was the hardest working senator to help pass that, and I'm willing to give him full credit for that. In a way, Bob Casey was the deciding vote in that for Obamacare. He was the 60th vote needed to end the filibuster against Obamacare. If he had not been in the Senate, if we had had Tom Smith there, Obamacare would not have become law. Now, Scott talked a lot about the recall election, Scott Walker. I'm really happy about that result too. But that election, that victory didn't come out of nowhere. There were over 4 million voter contacts made in support of Scott Walker before that election. Victories like that don't come out of nowhere. And it's really important that we start working now to get rid of Bob Casey. The other day I saw, I forget her name, she's the founder of the Kitchen Table Patriots and now works with Freedom Works. And she's running around, and when people come up and tell her that they're mad about the direction of this country, she says, "I don't want to talk to you unless you come out and help make a difference." And I'm not that blunt, but I would ask that you please help make a difference. A victory in the fall isn't going to happen unless we come and pull together and and actually contact voters. And I'm asking, I'm going to pass around some volunteer sheets. I'd please ask that you sign up to give us our address, your contact information, so we can let you know about what we're doing here in York County. We'd especially like to get people from this specific group, the 912 Patriots, to maybe get a phone bank running and make voter contacts to help us find out where those independents and Democrats are that are unlikely to vote for Bob Casey, and how we can help convince those people. Each time you contact a voter, they're more likely to vote for you. And that's something that would be a big, big, big help. I really believe, they always say each election is the most important election. I would say this is the most important election since 1864, when Abraham Lincoln was running for re-election. The outcome of this election is really going to shape the way our country goes. And if you're worried about, I really want to help Mitt Romney and I'd like to help Tom Smith, but I don't want to pick and choose, that's fine. You don't have to worry about that, because when we're working closely with Romney, so if you come out and volunteer for us, you'll be volunteering for Romney. So please, please, please consider spending a little bit of your time, even if it's just an hour a month that you can donate. That can make a big difference. That's what they did in Wisconsin. So please, please, please consider donating your time. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll be here afterwards. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Hey, John has some clipboards that he's going to pass around. So if you're interested in volunteering, and it doesn't take much. I mean, you can volunteer for like a phone bank one night and make some phone calls. Like John said, it's very important to get the grassroots out there behind these candidates because it's a matter of touching each voter, and there's a lot of independents and conservative Democrats out there that don't like what's going on. So please help John out. And there's also, he talked about the Victory Center. The Victory Center will be for Romney and Smith for the federal races, the statewide races. And if you can help out, I've had my issues with Bob Wilson with the York GOP, but I think that right now we need to unite for a common cause. And I think the common cause is to defeat Barack Obama and Bob Casey in the fall. So please help. I ask you to help. That's all I ask you to do. I don't ask much of you, and that's all I ask you to do. The next thing I'd like to bring up is a good friend of ours, Dr. Nick Pandalidis, is here. I asked Nick just this last week to speak 5 or 10 minutes on the healthcare exchanges and where they're at in Pennsylvania because Leanne was on Gary Sutton's show last Thursday, and during that show, Gary brought up the fact that Governor Corbett was going to be on the air. It was today or yesterday. I did not get a chance to hear him. I think it was yesterday, talking about healthcare exchanges. So I'd really like to hear where the healthcare exchanges are. And the best person to give you that information is Dr. Nick Pandalidis himself. So right here is Dr. Nick.
Well, thanks, Scott, Leanne, and everybody. It's always nice to come back. So. Just to kind of review what the exchanges are. First of all, it's a big misnomer. It's not really an exchange. An exchange suggests there's more choices and competition and individual choices, but that's not how it works. Really what the exchange is a new government bureaucracy that will administer the new deficit federal spending to qualify people for a new entitlement. And that entitlement is premium money for the government-approved policy. As you know, the government-approved policy is established by statute and by regulation. They just came out recently with the birth control having to be provided at no cost. And again, while that's bad enough from the religious standpoint, the point is that that's how they will regulate and control. People will not have any choice. The state will not have any choice. The Department of Health and Human Services will make a determination, a decision, and then that's how it is. Anyway, so we've been going around the state talking to different groups, and I know we spoke here before about the exchanges, saying that it is not a good idea. In fact, it's exactly the wrong direction to take to establish the exchange. Governor Corbett, strangely as Attorney General, initiated the suit against Obamacare in federal court, and now he wants to enact the exchange. And the reason they want to do that, allegedly, or what they say, is that if the state runs the exchange, somehow it will be different than if the federal government runs the exchange. But the law does not require the state to establish the exchanges. What it does say, if the state doesn't establish the exchange, the federal government will come in and set one up. The group, among the other groups that I represent, York912, Pennsylvania Coalition for Responsible Government, is the Docs for Patient Care, which is a group of practicing physicians that supports repeal of the President's health care law and passage of true health care reform that's based in free markets, which is really based in individual freedom and personal responsibility. So we were up in Harrisburg, I think about 3 weeks ago, and I would credit the work of this group and other grassroots groups and the work that Docs for Patient Care for being sort of a needle in the governor's administration, an irritant, because it became pretty clear while we were up there, the reason they were there, they weren't happy what we were out saying in public, that the governor's policy of planning to implement the exchanges really is enacting Obamacare. And you would say, well, if the Pennsylvania refuses to set up the exchange and the federal government comes in, is that any better? And the reality is there's a couple of facts that people don't know. The first is there's actually no funding in the law for the federal government to set up the exchange. That doesn't mean they won't ignore the law because they've done it before. The second thing is there is no provision for the federal government, if they run the exchange, to actually administer the subsidies, the premiums that are the heart of the exchange. So just simply refusing to set up the exchange sets up a couple of roadblocks. What we've been telling the governor's office is that they need to do and it's not just Docs for Patient Care, but it's just about every conservative policy think tank in the country. The next step is to pass a law in the state that says no one is required to buy insurance. Go ahead and pass some laws that will actually improve health care insurance peace of mind so that people can't get dropped from health care. Do some changes in the regulations so that there aren't as many coverages that need to be provided. As you know, if you buy insurance in Pennsylvania, which is where you have to buy it, there are certain coverages you must get. So, you know, for many of us, you know, infertility is no longer necessary. Pediatrics is no longer necessary. Even this one bill, this one provision, we keep hearing how great it is. You can keep your children onto your 26. None of this is free, and I want to thank everybody who's helping me keep my children on for 26. But you can see that the more the regulations are, the more the mandates, the higher the cost. So anyway, the good news is we are making a difference. The grassroots efforts are making a difference at the Pennsylvania level. So I did leave some more information on the exchanges, as well as one of my cards from Docs for Patient Care if you have any questions. I can't tell you how effective it is. Call your state representative, both your legislator and your senator. Tell them to sign the Americans for Prosperity pledge that says they will not support the exchange. Call the governor's office. Tell them that he should not support the exchange because supporting the exchange enacts Obamacare in our state, and it is exactly the wrong thing to do. I have a couple minutes to take questions, and then I'll clear out if anybody has any. Yes, ma'am.
Can we, as long as we have private insurance as we do now, are we staying off the exchange? Do you only go on the exchange if you're only going on the exchange if you go off your private insurance now?
Do you get your private insurance from your employer?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the provisions of the President's health care law is that the employer will have an option of either paying a $2,000 or $3,000 tax, depending on the person's financing, or and turning the person over to the exchange, or continuing to provide 65% of the cost of the government-approved health care policy. It's estimated that cost will be somewhere around $10,000 to $12,000 for a family of four. So there are a lot of people whose employers are going to do a simple mathematical calculation, which is, how do I spend less money? Providing 60% of the full bells and whistles federally approved policy, or paying the $2,000 or $3,000 tax and turning the employee over to the exchange. So, yeah, right now, if you're getting it through your employer, it's not an issue. But if your employer decides not to continue to provide insurance because, from a simple financial standpoint, it is cheaper for them not to do so, you will find yourself in the exchange. Yes, sir.
Dr. Nick, would it help if 100 of us appeared with signs the next time you're up there approaching the legislature, the governor, or whoever it is? Would your needle get longer and sharper if we were there?
I think so. And in fact, I've been working pretty closely with Katie Abrams and Jennifer Stefano, and I think we're not sure where they are right now, but we were planning to do some kind of a rally, and we will certainly get the word out. For the time being, it's sort of underground. I mean, we made enough noise. I mean, that was driven by the grassroots efforts, efforts by York912 and others. And we may have convinced them at least to hold off on doing anything until the November election.
Politicians are great at counting noses.
They absolutely are.
Impressed with the numbers.
Yeah, just a quick aside. When I went to Harrisburg to talk to different legislators, and I've talked to a dozen of them, I just naturally assumed I would make a good argument. It was rational, it was articulate, and they would agree with me. But the mistake I made is I assumed they actually wanted to fix something, but they don't. They just want to stay in office. And so, if you don't couch things in terms of this is going to make it difficult for you to stay in office, it really has no effect, and reason and logic play no role. All right, well, thanks very much. Yes, sir.
What kind of progress are we making with regards to Obamacare and the choice that people would have to be able to buy insurance from any company in the country?
Well, I mean, that brings up the next point, and that's where our efforts are right now. I think there's a good chance that it's going to get thrown out by the Supreme Court, but then that will immediately create a vacuum, and so we've been talking at the federal level to congressmen in particular about trying to put together a health care reform package incrementally, but it would decrease insurance regulation, promote health savings accounts, decrease the number of mandates. One of the biggest things that could be done, too, would also be to eliminate the federal tax bias that preferentially treats employer-provided health care insurance over individually purchased. And that's a really big deal. When you think about it, it doesn't strike you right off the bat. But what happens now, there's one interaction between a company's HR department and an insurance company. And the HR department wants to have the cheapest insurance they can get, and the company wants to sell the most expensive policy that they can. Nowhere in that calculation or in that discussion is, for any given employee, what is the best coverage. If you eliminate that federal tax bias, all of a sudden there's no reason for the employer to be making that interaction. They just take that money and they give it to the employee. And now, instead of having one exchange on the market, you have thousands of exchanges, and that promotes competition, which promotes choice, which lowers costs and increase quality and customer service. Yes, sir.
You spoke about the health insurance savings accounts.
Yes.
When I worked for somebody, I had the opportunity to do that, but if you don't use the money you put in there, they take it away.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that all about?
Yeah,
That really encourages somebody to put money aside.
Yeah.
You could either roll over till the next year or...
Right. So, and that's something called a flexible spending account, and very bad. I mean, what it ought to be is something that you can put money into as a tax credit or as a tax deduction, and that it's yours forever, and you can give it to your heirs.
I think that it needs to be said that those are completely different items.
Right.
So as long as...
Right. But the reality is the point of the health savings account in a very general way is where the money is where the power is in terms of decision making. So if the money is in the federal government, so if you want to give the federal government the power to control your health care, it's because they have the money. And if they say you can't have this procedure, I think that's completely within their right. They have to balance the budget. But I don't think it is right that it's within their power. And what the health savings accounts basically do is it puts the money in the hands of the people that actually would utilize the health care. But that's a long discussion. And well, anyway, I can't emphasize enough how effective groups like York912 have been. I have some flyers over there on the healthcare exchanges. There's a website you can go to and sign a petition. Please call your legislator. State and representative and senator, please call the governor's office and tell them not to implement the exchange, because implementing the exchange implements the president's health care law, which is a very, very bad law. Anyway, thanks very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. I really appreciate it. I want to bring something up. He hit on the fact of grassroots efforts, and Todd Kiefer told me something about the magic number. I want him to elaborate just a quick bit on that, if you could, Todd, please.
Okay. How many of you in here have heard of anything called the magic number as far as dealing with legislators? Anybody? Okay, this is pretty amazing stuff. I had Donna Ravito. She is head of the Lehigh Valley Coalition on Healthcare Reform, which is a pretty good group out in the eastern part of the state. And I was telling her that I was going to go talk to the people in western Pennsylvania, the people in Senator Don White's district, because Senator Fulmer, one of his bills actually all of his bills in his Healthy Pennsylvania legislation has been stalled in Don White's committee. And it is that motivation of constituents. When legislators hear from us, the constituent always has much more sway than a non-constituent. And in that regard, it can take what the magic number is, and when Donna Ravito told me about the magic number, I said, "What's that?" She said 10. I said, 10 what? She said, as few as 10 separate, and this is not cookie cutter stuff. This is like as few as 10 separate handwritten communications. Okay, this isn't just signing on a form. As few as 10 on one subject within a short period of time is enough to rattle a legislator's cage and wake them up to know that their voters are concerned about something. Since then, I've talked to other people who say that, I haven't talked to anybody who says that this magic number does not exist. At the federal level, I've been told that it's 50 handwritten communications. I've been told that the magic number is somewhat different for emails as compared to handwritten, as compared to phone calls. The good thing about a handwritten, and when you mail it in, you can put your return address on there, and there's confirmation that you are indeed a constituent. But it doesn't really, the point here is that it doesn't take huge numbers to wake these people up and to get their attention.
Thank you, Todd. I think it's very important because it's a great segue into what we're doing tonight. What we're doing tonight is a town hall style meeting where we wanted to compare House Bill 2230, which is sponsored by Seth Grove, who were actually sitting in Seth Grove's district, and House Bill 1776, sponsored by Jim Cox, who is in Berks County. We invited Seth Grove to come here tonight. He declined. He said he did not feel he had to defend his bill. I respectfully disagree with him on that. And I'd like to get a raise of hands of who is in Seth Grove's district here. Okay, so if my math does not fail me, it looks like there's more than 10 people who raised their hands. I would really seriously like for you people who raised your hands to write to Seth Grove and ask him why he did not come to our meeting that's in his district and it's his bill, and ask him to explain House Bill 2230 and ask him to tell you what his bill has over House Bill 1776. I really would appreciate that. So, I mean, it's all about grassroots. Another thing that Dr. Nick talked about was free market. And the best example of how the free market works is the deregulation of electricity in Pennsylvania. 2 years ago, it was deregulated, 2.5 years ago, I think it was. And I was paying 12 cents a kilowatt hour. I just signed up with First Energy, and I'm getting 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Everybody was all up in arms. Oh, the government can't take that restriction away. It's the electric costs are going to go through the roof. Well, they didn't because of one simple fact, and that's a free market. There's tons of companies that are providing electricity right now. So free market works. You just have to let it go. Now, with that being said, I'm going to turn the floor over to David Baldinger. David's been around the state fighting for your property tax rights, and he's here again, and we are so happy to have him. I'm going to turn it over to David. It's David's show until he wants to stop talking.
Give me just a moment to get settled in here, please. I have been put in a very unusual position tonight. trying to objectively explain Representative Seth Grove's bill. And I will do my best and try to be as objective as possible. For those of you who haven't been here before when I've been here, my name is David Baldinger. I'm from Berks County, and actually I'm wearing two hats tonight. The PTCC is the Pennsylvania Taxpayers Cyber Coalition. That is my individual group. It's a web and email-based group for people who don't have local groups like this available to them. The PCTA is the Pennsylvania Coalition of Taxpayer Associations. We are 72 taxpayer groups from across the state who have banded together to work on this one single topic, and that's the elimination of school property taxes. The PTCC is one of those groups, as is the York912 Patriots. We're glad to have them along because you're a great group. I'm going to start off with a couple of numbers. We're going to talk about the bills in a moment, but I don't think you can talk about property tax solutions if you don't understand the problem. And that's what's going to differentiate between HB 2230 and HB 1776. $24 billion is the current total cost of K-12 education in Pennsylvania. 6.25% is the historic average increase in that cost of education annually. If you extend that out over 10 years, you're going to find that 10 years from now, the total cost of education in Pennsylvania is going to balloon to $44 billion. This is something we can't afford and must take steps now to slow down. 30%. That is the amount you could see your property taxes go up over the next 2 to 3 years, mostly because of the pension crisis. How many of you are familiar with the PESERS crisis? Okay, I see a few. The Pennsylvania Public Employee Retirement System has been underfunded for a number of years, mostly because of the stock market downturn. It is required by law to be fully funded, and that funding falls to the local school districts to provide. That means increases in property taxes to pay for it, and it's going to balloon tremendously over the next few years. 30% is the number you could see your property taxes rise in the next few years. How many of you can sustain a 30% increase in your school property taxes? I'm sure a lot of you are pressured right now. 30% is just an unconscionable number. And finally, 10,000. I usually have an exhibit I use with this. It's from the Reading Eagle newspaper that showed over 1,100 properties that were being sold at sheriff's sale because of property taxes only, not foreclosures. 10,000 is the number of homes, average, sold in Pennsylvania at sheriff's sale for non-payment of property taxes. I'm not talking about foreclosures. This is strictly property taxes, and this doesn't account for the folks who voluntarily sell their homes just to avoid foreclosure so they can get their equity out of the house. Because once it goes to sheriff's sale, all they're concerned about is making the tax bill, and if anything's left of the equity, too bad, you've lost it. 10,000 a year, something else that needs to be stopped. So really the problem is not so much property taxes as it is the way we finance education in Pennsylvania. And that's really what we're talking about, education finance reform, not necessarily property tax relief. First myth, property taxes are the problem. No, they're not. They're only a symptom of a much bigger problem. First of all, property tax system dates back to the Middle Ages and feudal times. The landowners at that time were the only ones who really had any money. Their serfs didn't, so they were taxed on the value of their land. Somehow, in the early 1800s, we imported this system into Pennsylvania on the theory that since we were an agrarian society, mostly farmers, it was assumed that the farmer who was farming 400 acres was making more than the farmer who was farming 40 acres. And he was taxed on the value of his land, assuming that for a proxy for income, because there was no other reason to report income at that time. Besides that, the property tax system is really unfair in that a basic tenet of taxation is that the taxpayer should be able to afford the tax. In this case, there's no correlation whatsoever between the property taxes and a person's income. Just because you own a home, does that mean you have the income to support the property tax? Not necessarily, especially with seniors who are on a fixed income. Property taxes are arbitrary and unfair, simply. We've seen reassessments across the state that were prompted by a court decision a couple of years ago. Pittsburgh has been the latest, or Allegheny County, where even brand new assessments come out wrong. The Allegheny County Court, they've had reassessment, they've had 185,000 appeals to the new assessment values. You've seen what's happened here. Adams County got nailed a couple of years ago. They're still fighting that. There's no way to make this system fair, yet the legislators keep on trying to say, yes, property tax reassessments are the way to get it done. The inability to pay property tax bills and the loss of homes. I've already mentioned the 10,000 figure, but people are just becoming unable to pay their property tax bills. I always pay our property tax bill on the very last day of the rebate period. Our tax collector is very friendly to this idea. She agrees with eliminating the property tax. She said, it's going to put me out of a job, but I don't care. She's seen what is happening to people. First of all, more folks are going on the payment plan where you can make 3 payments a year. They can no longer afford to make the payment in one lump sum. But even worse, she said more and more people are complaining to her that they've had to take out reverse mortgages just to pay their rent to the government. You work your entire life, you pay off your mortgage, you own your house, you think you're secure, and then you have to remortgage it with a reverse mortgage just to pay rent to the government. It's unconscionable. Out of control spending. I gave you the number up front about how school costs are going to increase over the next few years, but we've seen it. I don't like to knock school boards. I think in a lot of cases it's an underappreciated job. Some people work really hard at it, and they try to do the right thing. But on the other hand, there are those who are there with an agenda other than what benefits the taxpayer. Every year in the Reading Eagle, the Berks County newspaper, when there's a school board election, they'll publish a short bio on all the candidates. Last year when they ran them, I was really surprised to see all the cross-pollination. For example, someone who's a teacher in one district and on a school board in another district, or the spouse of a teacher on that same district school board, or retired administrators, or retired union officials. These folks aren't there looking out for the taxpayer. They're looking out for their own interests. And the worst are the ones I like to call the helicopter parents. These are the ones who hover over their kids all the time. They want exactly the best thing for their child. They get themselves elected to a school board, and their only agenda is to see that their kids get what they want them to have. And in the end, the taxpayer is always the one getting the short end of the stick. This is part of the reason why we have the out-of-control spending. Lack of effective education cost controls. Yes, Act 1, the famous gambling legislation, was supposed to take care of cost controls. It's done nothing. It was supposed to limit increases in property taxes to the increase in inflation. However, there's exceptions that are granted by the Pennsylvania Department of Education to allow increases far beyond that. We have a couple of increases coming up this year in Berks County that are in excess of 4% when the inflationary level is 1.7%. In fact, out of 500 school districts in the state, this year so far, 199 have applied to the PDE for exceptions to referendum. They've all been rubber stamped. Education and taxation inequities. I'll be very brief with this, but this is part of the problem too. The current 1991 state funding formula, the money that comes to the school districts from the state, held harmless all school districts forever, meaning they would get the same relative funding no matter what happened in their district. In the Berwick School District in Columbia County, they've lost 900 students in the past 10 years. At the same time, they've hired 40 new teachers because they get the same relative funding from the state. They can afford to do it, and their property tax load is about 40% of their school budget. Any of you here from the York Suburban School District? 89% of your school's budget is financed through property taxes because you've had increase in population from people coming across the border from Maryland. You're getting nothing more from the state than you did in 1991, and it all falls to the individual homeowner to make up for those property taxes, make up for those taxes. The difference between 40% in one school district and 89% in another, how fair is that? And the projected cost of education, which we already talked about. And this is the one that really gets to me. The American Legislative Exchange Council does a survey every year. They call it the Rich States, Poor States Report. It ranks every state in the country on economic competitiveness. They haven't issued this year's yet. This is last year's results. At that time, Pennsylvania was 46th in economic performance, 43rd in economic competitiveness, and 41st in outmigration, people leaving the state, mostly young people. About 3 weeks ago, another one came out from the Tax Foundation, a survey. They do a survey each year based on tax load on businesses, which is basically a measure of business friendliness. Tax Foundation rated Pennsylvania number 49 out of 50 for new businesses, 50 of 50 for established businesses, mostly because of the property tax. We're driving away our residents. We're driving businesses from Pennsylvania and the jobs they create simply because of the property tax. You see, this isn't about property tax relief. This is about fixing a broken system that is killing the state's economy. Anthony Davies, a professor of economics at Duquesne University, had a quotation in that, and I overran my notes here. Give me a second until I find it. He said, Pennsylvania's outmigration problem, and again, it's mostly young people, he sees it as a symptom of increasing property taxes, which along with increased income taxes affects where young college graduates choose to move and live. He said they can go anywhere they want, so of course the states that are going to attract them on average are the states with lower property taxes. The young people graduate college and they get out of Pennsylvania for a better tax climate, which in the end means who's left? The seniors and middle-class working people who have to pay the freight. Anybody know what the biggest industry in Pennsylvania is? What's our biggest industry? Agriculture, farms. And we're not talking here about Archer Daniels Midland or huge agribusinesses. We're talking about family farms that have been in families for generations. They are being killed by the property tax. There was a hearing on House Bill 1776 on Monday in Harrisburg, and someone from the Pennsylvania Grange and the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau both spoke out in favor of 1776, and they described the problem that we've known for a while. These farmers are forced each year to sell off an acre of land just to pay for the property tax and remain profitable. I gave this presentation a few months ago in Monroe County in the Poconos. There was a woman there who told me that 10 years ago her father was farming 40 acres of Christmas trees. Today he's farming 10. Over the past 10 years he has sold off 30 acres of his property just to pay the property taxes on the farm. We had a person from Luzerne County, a farmer, who was at our rally on May 7th in the Capitol. He told a story about, he's a family farm. He said he feeds what, Jen? He figures he farms enough to feed about 350 people a year. He's having such a tough time because of the property taxes. His wife is actually baking homemade baked goods, and they're selling them at the farm just so we can raise enough money to pay the property taxes to keep on farming. The largest industry in Pennsylvania, and we are killing it with the property tax. So is it about property tax relief? Not at all. That's the problem in a irreparably broken K-12 public education finance system. If we're going to fix the problem, we've got to fix the system. Myth number 2, property tax relief or property tax reform. How many times have you heard those words? Property tax relief is the solution. Okay. Latest attempt at property tax relief was Act 1, that very famous bill that was passed in 2006 that was supposed to give you all that relief and even elimination from gambling money. How'd that work out for you? $100? You bet. Mine's $111 in my school district. I think the statewide average is somewhere around $180. The low was $25. Thank you very much. This is property tax relief in Harrisburg parlance. And we keep hearing legislators talk about property tax relief. We're going to hear about property tax relief tonight in HB 2230. Act 50, Act 72 were both property tax relief measures. They called for a shift from your property tax to a local earned income tax, a partial shift. In the case of both those acts, it was up to the local school boards to decide whether or not to participate. It died in every school district in the state. Governor Rendell wasn't happy with this, so in 2006 he came up with Act 1. That again is the gambling revenue thing, but it also called for a shift to a local earned income tax from the property tax. Only this time, instead of trusting it to the school boards, knowing it was going to get killed again, he took it to the voters and had a referendum in 2007. How many people in each school district wanted to have a partial shift to an earned income tax? 498 school districts were eligible for the referendum. 494 rejected it. Governor Rendell said afterwards the people were stupid for rejecting it. It wasn't stupidity. The people understood, and this is part of the problem, again, with property tax relief. Yes, you can shift part of that burden from the property tax to the income tax, but as long as you don't do nothing about that property tax, it's going to continue to rise until it's right back where it was before, and you're paying another tax besides that. House Bill 1600, that came up 2 years ago. This was supposed to be property tax relief. It called for a 0.5% increase in the sales tax, a 0.25% increase in the state income tax, and would have given you about a $400 rebate, which I'm betting for most of you wouldn't be all that much anyway. You would have gotten a $400 rebate for it. Guess what? Property taxes keep going up, and pretty soon that $400 rebate is eaten up, and you're right back where you were, but this time with 2 new taxes to pay. Property tax relief. Any property tax relief is going to be outstripped by rising property taxes unless you fix the system, and we don't want to hear the word relief. It's doomed to failure as long as you don't restructure the system. This poor guy's been sitting there for 30 years, and nothing has been done. And I made that point at the rally on May 7th. We've been waiting for 30 years. It's been another 5 years since Act 1, when we were promised property tax relief. The legislators tell us that this is a very complex problem. It's not easily resolved. I'm sorry. That's nothing more than a whiny excuse to absolve themselves from taking effective action. It's totally untrue. All they need is courage and political will, and ignore the special interests, ignore the partisan politics, and do what's right for the taxpayers, the people who elected them. And they refuse to do it. A lot of legislators have said, too, that taxpayers won't accept the massive change that we're talking about. And they're basing their ideas on what happened with Act 1. I've been told from folks all across the state, they don't care about what we're trying to do as long as the property tax is eliminated and the tax that replaces it is fair. So the excuse that the public will not accept what we're trying to do is totally wrong. Go ahead, see you, guy. We're going to talk about 2 bills tonight. HB 2230, which is a bill that was introduced by State Representative Seth Grove a few months ago, and House Bill 1776 and Senate Bill 1400, which is identical legislation. We just have it introduced in both chambers. I'm going to talk about 2230 first, and I'm going to try to be very objective about this, and then I'll answer some questions on it if you have any. Go ahead. Okay. In the co-sponsorship memo, the bill is entitled Local Tax Diversification for Property Tax Reduction or Elimination. Okay, that's the title of the bill. The bill right now has been released from the Finance Committee. It is awaiting action on the floor of the House of Representatives. It has 30 co-sponsors. 2 of them are Democrats, the remainder Republicans. I'm assuming at this point they're waiting until 1776 comes out of committee until they do anything about it. It's supposed to give you property tax relief for all 3 property taxes: school, county, and municipal. The prime sponsor, Representative Grove, says that the advantage of this plan is that it retains local control and allows local officials to make decisions on what is the best mix of taxes for their community. And in some cases, will limit property tax increases, in some cases. So here's how it works. It's actually a 2-part bill. Let's look at the local sales tax option first. That's the first part of the bill. It calls for a 1% increase in the sales tax on the local level. The bill mandates that every county in the state has to hold a referendum on the 1% increase, meaning that 1% increase will be effective county by county. If, for example, the York County voters approved it and the Adams County voters did not, you would have a 7% sales tax in York County and a 6% sales tax in Adams County. The rate can vary all over the state. Now, this applies to the school district property taxes only, not the local and municipal. We'll get to that in a minute. This is strictly for school district property taxes. If the referendum fails, the first referendum is mandated, and I believe it's within 6 months of enactment of the legislation. If the referendum fails, 10% of the voters can petition for a new referendum. I don't see why you'd want to do that. If it failed in the first place, why would you want to go back to get beaten up a second time? But it gives you the opportunity to do that. Total revenue received from the increase in the sales tax will then be divvied up to the school districts by head count. All the head count in the county is combined. That's divided into the amount of tax revenue received and sent back to the schools based on the number of students. then that is used to directly reduce your property tax, whatever amount that is in each school district. So obviously it's going to vary district to district based on the student population. And let's see, we said on a per pupil basis, got that bullet. There's no provision to keep property taxes from rising in the future. There's no cap on it. So the property taxes can continue to go up even though this is enacted. Okay. This is kind of involved, and I'm sorry about that. Joel Sears from the York County Taxpayers Council, one of our PCTA member groups, did a financial analysis on how it would affect people in York County and people in another area of the state. Most of the numbers on here are only to show how the conclusions were reached. Retail sales in York County is about $4.9 billion. Of that, about $3.7 billion is taxable sales.
David.
Yes.
Can I interrupt you? We have handouts of this.
Okay.
And we're going to pass these around, but we only have 30 to 40. I think we only have 30 of them. So if you're a couple, just take one if you want one. Sorry.
That's okay. With a 1% tax increase, that would raise about $37 million for York County. As the county population, the percentage of school age, number of students, the relief per student comes to $495. In the York Suburban School District, as the example, Joel lives in York Suburban. That's why it was the easiest thing for him to work with, and he's a school board member, so he knows their finances. For York Suburban School District, total relief would be $1.485 million. Property tax revenue is $36 million currently, so that would give you a 4.1% relief, or $148.57 per homeowner for a 1% increase in the sales tax. Joel did a comparison with Montgomery County and particularly the Abington School District. Now, Montgomery County, remember, has the King of Prussia Mall and Plymouth Meeting Mall, huge retail centers. And all the folks, or many folks, from the ring counties, Bucks, Chester, Montgomery itself, Delaware County, shop at those big malls. By shopping there, they are actually helping property tax relief for people in Montgomery County, while getting no benefit of their own. So take a look what happens at the Abington School District. They get 6.7%, or $260.15. A whole lot more than you get here in York County, but still not significant, for a 1% increase in the sales tax. That's the net result, and that is the number that Representative Grove will not tell you. Go ahead. Part 2. This is an optional earned income tax. It is meant for county, municipal, and school property taxes. It will allow each one of those entities to enact it if they wish. This is not by vote or referendum like Part 1. This is by the choice of the governing body. So if your township decides they want to do it, or your town decides they want to do it, they can do it unilaterally. They don't need any approval from you. They have to shift enough to earned income tax to guarantee at least a 30% reduction in your property tax bill. So whatever that amount comes to, it could be a 1% earned income tax, it could be a 3% earned income tax. This can be enacted by all three of the taxing bodies if they want to. Now think about that for a second. What's it going to take to get a 30% reduction in school, municipal, and county property taxes? Let's say, just off the top of my head, and we're going to have some numbers in a second, but off the top of my head, let's say it takes 2% earned income tax to achieve that in each one of those three entities. You could very quickly be looking at a 6% earned income tax. Revenue is to be used dollar for dollar replacement for tax reduction by each one of the taxing bodies. And there's the last bullet. It has to be at a rate that's sufficient to at least give 30% relief. It can be at a rate sufficient to completely eliminate tax if they choose to do that. I can't see that happening. The total shift from property tax to earned income tax is very unlikely. If they decide to do it, if the officials in each of those three entities decide to go ahead with it, it freezes the property tax at the newly reduced rate. They cannot raise property taxes from that point on, but they can increase the income tax. So instead of being able to increase one tax, they can increase the other tax. That increase is limited to the current limits of Act 1, which is supposed to be an inflationary level, but we've already talked about how that works, which means it doesn't. But they can actually increase the income tax to raise more revenue in the future. That's the inflationary index. Total elimination is not guaranteed. 30% is the minimum. They don't necessarily say you have to go over that. And if anyone does do it, are they going to go above 30%? But further, right now, counties and municipalities are not limited in any way as to how much they can increase your property tax. They have the flexibility to do whatever they want to do. If they go with this plan and decide to shift to a partial earned income tax, they're stuck to an inflationary index. How many counties and municipalities do you think want to be stuck with that kind of with those kind of constraints on being able to raise revenue? I just can't see a whole lot of counties and municipalities going for this basically because of that. So here's Joel's numbers on how this would affect you. This one's even more complicated than the last one, and I'm sorry, I'll try to get the median on it. This is for York County. $36 million in property tax, 30% relief. No, I'm sorry, this is for a typical community or township. 30% relief would require a new earned income tax. If it's currently 0.5%, which most municipalities are, it would require a new rate of 2.16%, or a 1.66% increase in the earned income tax. So you're going to go from a 0.5% earned income tax to 2.16 to get a 30% reduction. If you look at the median, household income of $50,000, median property tax bill of $3,500, you're going to get $220 in relief. Notice what happens, though, as the household income goes up and the median property tax goes down. At $2,500 property tax, $50,000 income, you're in the whole $80. So actually, anything without hooks, without parentheses around it, is a gain for the taxpayer. Anything without parentheses means it's going to cost you if this tax shift takes place. These numbers are pretty accurate. Joel did a really good job on it. So if you notice somebody making $70,000 a year who has $1,500 in property taxes, they're going to be $712 in the hole on this. Now, this is just one example at 2.16%. Add on top of that, if the school district would decide to do it, and if a county would decide to do it on top of that, you could easily be looking at a 6 to 7% earned income tax. And excuse me, they can also do a personal income tax as well. Who knows the difference? Earned income tax is on money you actually earn working at a job. Personal income tax includes that, plus income from investments. So those of you who are seniors living on investments, those investments would be taxed as well if you decide to go with a personal income tax instead of an earned income tax. I'm going to stop here for a moment. Anybody have any questions about this? Yes, sir. Let them get to you with a microphone, please. I'll leave the chart up so you can look it over.
The whole time you're talking, I could see something arising here. I mean, in this environment, no politician wants to raise taxes because he loses votes. So right off the bat, nobody's going to enact this, a municipal tax, an income tax. So you're dead before you even start.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would
so
think
what are they
so.
even talking about?
When I get to the next part of this, I'll theorize on why I think this is being done. But for the moment, I know I haven't been totally objective to this point. I'm going to try to stay objective and answer your questions as best I can. Then I'll tell you why I don't like it.
Another quickie, if you bought a car in Adams County at 6% and your 7% is in York County, does York County get that extra 1%, or we have a bunch of new bureaucrats making sure you pay it, or you're just exempt from paying it?
No, in fact, you would have to pay it and would go to the county where you bought the car.
But you got a bunch of new bureaucrats making sure it is paid.
That's right. It's an accounting nightmare.
Yeah.
And again, I want to stay objective, but it's an accounting nightmare. I mean, varying tax rates all over, by county, all over the state. Someone in the back there. Wait till the mic gets there, please.
Thank you. I've heard it said from Harrisburg that they have to stop blaming Harrisburg, and what schools should do is start releasing some of their money that are in funds. Now, I know York Suburban has in its fund for emergencies $900,000. Do you
That's
think
low,
that's
by the way.
What?
That's low, by the way, compared to some districts. I'm
It
sorry.
is?
Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
Now, should they release some of that money anyway to help with relief until something else gets done? What's your opinion?
Probably, but that's going to be a one-shot anyway.
That's what I thought.
At the Reading School District, for example, and I'm familiar with that because it's in my county, the Reading School District this year is $50 million in the hole in their budget. To balance it, they're going to dip into the reserves to the tune of about $20 million. But you can only do that so often before the reserves run out. Yeah, it might help for the first year. They might have enough to take it through to a second year. But anything beyond that, it's unlikely. And that's, again, why the system needs to be fixed. There's another question back here. For the moment, let's stick with HB 2230. I'll answer general questions at the end.
Would a flat tax have any effect on what we're talking about?
Repeat that again. Repeat that, please.
Would a flat tax have any impetus on what we're talking about?
A flat tax on what? Give me an example. You mean a flat income tax? A flat
tax have any impact on what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, I'm saying a flat tax on what? A flat tax on income. A flat sales tax? Well, that's basically what we have anyway. And we'll talk about 1776. That more resembles a flat tax than this does. And I'll tell you why in a minute. In the back. Dr. Nick.
Yeah. How did Seth Grove come up with this ridiculous scheme? I mean, what is underlying, this nonsense? It makes no sense to me.
I can't say definitely. I'll give you my theories.
Hold your tongue until.
I'll be kind. I think HB 2230 is meant as a HB 1776 killer. The idea is it always is this way in Harrisburg. Do as little as possible and promise as much as you can. And Representative Grove has been saying all along, this is a great idea for property tax relief and keeps the decision local, and that's what we should do, and this is going to give you great relief. But in the end, it does nothing. It just takes us 4 or 5 years to figure that out once it's enacted. I think this option is in there for property tax relief to try to kill 1776. There's opposition within the House Republican caucus to 1776 because it is just such a big bill and does so much. And I think the legislators are afraid to do anything with it. I'm going to be real frank here. I'm not even sure that Seth wrote this bill. I'm not sure that this came from him at all. I think this came from somebody else and he was told, you do this. I'm only guessing. Please, don't take that as gospel. But there's a whole lot more to this than meets the eye. And what has really been interesting about this is, I was told earlier this evening that Representative Grove was on the Gary Sutton show last week and had a really difficult time. It was described to me as a train wreck. He had a difficult time justifying this and why he's even promoting this bill. And everything I've seen from him has not been so much touting the benefits of HB 2230 as trying to tear down HB 1776. He, on his Facebook page, on the stuff he puts in his flyers that he sends out to constituents, it's all been the same. All he does is hammer HB 1776, and that's not the answer. But my bill is, but he doesn't give a reason. So I don't know.
I'd like to add to one thing that Seth said on Friday morning that was key was that he said that someone asked him, or Gary asked him a question about tax. First thing, Gary didn't start out with property tax, the property tax bills. He started out with collecting of taxes. And how do we collect these taxes? Because Scott Perry was going to be on and talking about collecting back taxes. And Seth said something very interesting to the fact that, well, with the property tax, they have a 96% collection rate because it's tied in your property. So you have to pay the tax, which really, I mean, my light went on in my head. It's like, well, they want to keep the property tax because it's easy to collect because they have your collateral. They have your house to take away if they don't collect, if you don't pay your taxes. And I want to make one more comment. The gentleman here talking about the taxes per county, and I didn't know this, where it was you could raise sales tax 1% in one county against another. And if Adams County, why would Adams County raise their their sales tax to 7% and York County stays at 6%, who's going to go to Adams County to buy anything?
Sure.
No one's going to raise their sales tax by 1%.
Sure.
Right, they're going to go to Apple in York.
The property tax is a shotgun to the homeowner's head. And you're going to do whatever you're told to do as long as that shotgun is being held there. And you're right about the collection rate. At the rally that we had on May 7th, Dr. Catherine Fike was there. She's from Westmoreland County. She's a school director. She spoke out harshly against school board members. And she said the same thing. The school directors know. Were you at the rally? Do you remember what she said, Scott? She said something about consistency of yield. Consistency of yield in the property tax, that they know they're going to get their money. People will do anything. They'll go without food, they'll go without drugs, they'll go without entertainment, they'll do whatever they have to do to keep that roof over their heads. And I think Scott made a very good point with that. Any other questions about this? I know Seth Grove was invited here tonight. And he refused to come, and quite frankly, I would have liked nothing better than to go head-to-head with Seth Grove over this. I would have enjoyed that. Yes,
David.
sir.
David, over here.
David.
Who are we going to? Okay.
Yeah, in all fairness to Seth Grove.
Oh, all right. Let's do it.
Okay?
Yes.
I have a, and by the way, I do support 1776, but I think 1776 has problems, but I have some ideas on how to get around those problems. But in all fairness to Seth, this is something that comes from Seth's office that he handed out, and I see nothing in here. I don't know what I'm doing. But it talks about 1776. It talks about 2230, and I see nothing in here as far as bashing 1776 whatsoever.
Maybe not in that. Go to his
Okay,
Facebook
so
page and take a look.
I just wanted to bring that up.
That's
it's not
fine.
in interest of fairness. But
Possibly not in that, but again.
one of the things that did come up, and this answers what Dr. Nick was getting at. Seth claims that the property tax situation is not a burden in all areas of the state. He claims that there are some areas that have not seen the increases that we have here in Central Pennsylvania and York County, and that those people are not so rattled by this. They don't understand what all our beef is all about, and that is how he explains is his idea of not imposing of the local control part of it, of letting each local area make their own choice, their own decision.
Okay, first of all, he's correct. It's not a problem in all areas of the state, and I gave the example earlier about the Berwick School District in Columbia County. However, to say that one size fits all, I think he's wrong with that, and when I explain 1776, you'll come to understand that virtually every taxpayer, homeowner rather, in the state stands to benefit from HB 1776, whether or not their property tax burden is low or not. I think what Representative Grove is trying to say is it's hard to get support from legislators in areas that are benefiting from the current education subsidy and have fairly low property taxes. They don't want to support it. I'll give you the other side of that. Marcellus shale taxing has been a huge issue. Now that strip of Marcellus runs catty-cornered across the state like this. There are people from Erie in the northwest who have no interest in Marcellus. There are people from southeast who have no interest in Marcellus. But they voted the bill because it was in the best interest of the state. I don't want to be here about this sick parochial attitude about, oh, it doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to vote for it. It's time to get rid of that attitude and consider what's best for the state, not for just your 40,000 constituents, but let's get it right for everybody in this state. And that's the argument I'll make against that. I'm sorry. The fact that he doesn't bash 1776 and that's the exception, not the rule. And again, go to his Facebook page and see what he said there about 1776. At every turn, he hammers the bill. There was a question over here. Yes, sir.
That's I called his office, Seth Grove, to ask him, why are you proposing something like this when we got 1776? And his official answer I got was that we need to do it incrementally. 1776 will never pass. That was his answer.
Act 50, Act 72, Act 1 were all incremental solutions that went nowhere.
That's what I told him.
Why is this incremental solution going to be any different? Besides that, you bump that sales tax up to 7%, you've just lost the statewide funding mechanism for 1776. Right. It kills 1776 not only for now, but in the future. And he knows that. There are no incremental answers to this. It's got to be done now. And I'll give you another reason why. I started working on this issue in 2004. with Sam Rohr. At that time, we were looking at replacing $8 billion in property taxes statewide, school property taxes. Now that nut is $12.7 billion. We've gone from $8 billion to $12.7 in 8 years. That's almost a 40% increase. There are only two taxes at the state level capable of replacing the school property tax, the income tax and the sales tax. No other tax has the capacity to do it. And we are almost outstripping the capacity of those two to do it without going to some ridiculous sales tax rate like 9% or a 6% earned income tax. We're on the very edge of it right now. If this is delayed another 2, 3, 4 years, we're not going to be able to get it done, ever. Enacting HB 2230 would kill it for the next 5 years until it was discovered, oh, this didn't work just like Act 1 didn't work. But by that time, it's too late. It's got to be taken care of now. This is critical. Seriously, this is critical. If we're going to get it done, it's got to be done this legislative session.
Great segue. Can we move to 1776 and save the questions to the end?
Sure, I just wanted to get this out of the way first, in all fairness. And in fact, go to the next one, please. I'll run this down real quick, why we object to it. The legislation by itself does nothing. If it passes the House, it needs further enabling either through referendum for the sales tax shift or by decision of the taxing bodies in each entity. So if the legislation passes, it means nothing. It doesn't do anything. Not guaranteed any reduction or elimination. Varying retail activity and enactment or non-enactment in each county means inequitable school property tax relief across counties. Not everybody is treated fairly with this. I already told you 3% plus new income taxes are possible if all three taxing entities would decide to do it. Local tax shift approach has been tried with 50, 72, and 1. They've all failed. We're going to try it again. Why? It's been rejected 3 times, and we're going to try it all over again just to have it rejected a 4th time. Doesn't solve the primary problem of a broken education finance system. You can still be evicted from your home for non-payment of the property taxes, which are going to continue to go up. And greatly varying tax rates in each county are going to be an accounting nightmare. That was brought up before. How do you keep track of 6 and 7% rates in various counties? Go ahead. Okay, there you go. House Bill 1776, Senate Bill 1400, identical legislation. House Bill 1776 was introduced in the House by Representative Jim Cox from Berks County. It currently has 70 co-sponsors, 2/3 Republicans, 1/3 Democrat. In previous versions of this bill by Sam Rohr, there was never any bipartisan support, and I already told you with 2230 they have 2 Democrat co-sponsors. Pardon me, I'd like to see more than 1/3 Democrats on the bill, but actually this is a pretty good number. And 70 co-sponsors is terrific at this point. Senate Bill 1400 was introduced by Senator David Argall. He's up in Northeast Pennsylvania. It was co-introduced by Senator Mike Fulmer and Senator Jeff Piccola. Currently has 13 senators as co-sponsors with the same distribution as House Bill 1776, about a 2/3, 1/3 Republican to Democrat. And it's great that we're seeing bipartisan support for this and this many co-sponsors. So let's look at it. I'm going to back up here for a second and explain what happened with this bill. Jim Cox wanted this to be as inclusive as possible, at the same time not be a carbon copy of Sam Rohr's Property Tax Elimination Act. The Property Tax Elimination Act had some problems from a legislative standpoint in that there were things in it that were just unacceptable to legislators, and they weren't going to go along with it. What distinguishes 1776 from other bills, and I'm going to hit Seth over the head again, I'm sorry, but whenever Seth talks about 2230, he always says, my bill. In this case, we're going to say it's our bill, because Jim Cox worked with the 72 taxpayer groups from the get-go on crafting this legislation. It started in November 2010. Jim and I took a trip to Harrisburg together to talk with members of the Appropriations Committee to get initial numbers to try to start building this. And on the way back from Harrisburg, he said, what do we want to do with this bill? And the entire trip was nothing but discussing it. We stripped down the old Rohr bill to its very basics, which were the 2 funding sources, and just completely rebuilt it from that point. And since November 2010, every decision that has been made about the crafting of this legislation has been made in concert with the taxpayer groups. We have been full partners in the way this legislation is written, and that's something you never see in Harrisburg politics. You'll see the special interests come in and sit down and literally dictate bills to the legislators, but the taxpayers are never represented, and we are in this case. And I'll also mention something else that Representative Cox did. Sam Rohrer always wrote the bill and said, here it is, I want your support. The reason 1776 took a year to introduce after the beginning of the legislative session was because Jim extensively talked with his colleagues in the House to find out what they liked, what they didn't like, and tried to incorporate their suggestions whenever he could. So it's a huge collaborative effort between as many members of the House who wanted to participate and the taxpayer groups themselves. And we're pretty proud of the fact that we were able to be a part of making this legislation. So, when Jim and I first talked about it in November 2010, we came up with some basic goals. First of all was elimination of the school property tax. Now there's going to be an exception to that, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Total elimination to be phased in over a 2-year period. Sam's bill called for 4 years. However, in 4 years, it built a tremendous cash reserve, and that caused a lot of problems. The cash reserve, I believe, that was built up in that act was about $8 billion, and nobody wanted to accept that kind of cash reserve. So this was phase it in over a 2-year period and get it done. First year, freeze school property taxes at their current level. Second year, they're gone. Total elimination of school board taxing ability. No longer will they be able to tax you out of your homes. Now there's an exception to that too, which I'll get to, and there's a reason, but you're not gonna disagree with it, I'm sure. Stabilization of school funding. I'm going to get off the track here a little bit and explain what that's all about. With the current economic climate and the downturn in the housing market, people's home values and business values have declined. There have been a lot of property tax appeals. I'll give you a few examples. In Berks County, Highlands at Wyomissing, a nursing home, appealed their property tax assessment, $250,000 a year lost to the Wyomissing School District from a single assessment. About the worst one in the state is the Upper Marion School District in Montgomery County. GlaxoSmithKline has a huge manufacturing facility in their school district. They appealed their property tax assessment in 2008. The school district opposed the appeal. It wasn't settled till 2010, but eventually settled in GlaxoSmithKline's favor. $2 million a year lost to the Upper Marion School District. What made it even worse for them was because it was originally filed in 2008, it was retroactive after it was settled, and the school district had to rebate $4 million to GlaxoSmithKline. These are just a couple of examples. It's happening all over the state with appeals. So while there are those who say, yes, the property tax is the most stable tax, that's not necessarily the case anymore, especially with the property tax appeals. And one other thing, I got an email about 3 weeks ago from a school district finance officer in Montgomery County. He said, we are absolutely the poster child for this problem. He said, in the past year, we have lost $94 million in assessed value that translates to $1.7 million in revenue. And they have 50 cases on appeal in the court system right now, which is costing them money, obviously, to fight. But every time one of these appeals is granted, your property taxes go up. So I don't want to hear about the stability of property taxes anymore. That's not the case. And that was one of the goals, stabilize school funding to prevent what's happening right now with the assessment appeals, and establish realistic limits on increases in K-12 education funding. I talked about that up front, and the historic increases, we want to hold it to the rate of inflation. The elimination swap must be tax revenue neutral for 2 reasons. First of all, it's the right thing to do. We don't want to increase taxes. But second, Governor Corbett signed the Americans for Tax Reform No Tax Increase Pledge. If this generates $1 more than the property taxes we're eliminating, he's not going to sign the bill. So it is absolutely dead-on tax revenue neutral. Moderate expansion of the sales tax base to include more items and services. Pennsylvania, of all the states, has about the narrowest sales tax base. Most states tax far more items and services than we do. This is the primary revenue generator in HB 1776. The expansion of the sales tax base is a huge advantage to us. People have asked me in the past what other states have done this. None, at least not this method, because they don't have the sales tax base available to them. I want to give you some examples. I got ahead of my notes again. Some of the things that would be taxed: chewing gum, candy, newspapers, magazines. Yes, food is included in this, but only food that is not on the WIC list. For those of you not familiar with the WIC list, it stands for Women, Infants, and Children. It's a standard established by the federal government, and the items in the WIC list are those that are nutritionally sound. Not a whole lot of added sugar, no preservatives or other kinds of additives, adulterants. So if you're buying the nutrition-based foods in the WIC list, there's no sales tax on it. If you got to have your Twinkies, yeah, you're going to pay sales tax on it. It also taxes clothing, but only individual items with a value of $50 or greater. And we discussed that at great length. Most of what you're wearing, all of you tonight, I'm betting costs less than $50. A sweatshirt, a t-shirt, a polo shirt, a pair of slacks, socks, underwear. You're not paying $50 for those things. The parents who want to buy their kids $150 Nikes, yeah, you're going to pay sales tax on it. But this is part of the revenue generator. It also increases the rate of the sales tax to 7%. And increases the personal income tax. It's currently at 3.07%. It takes it to 4.01%, an increase of 0.94%. Depending on your philosophical viewpoint, you might say one or the other. The Democrats in general would prefer that we do everything with an income tax. The Republicans say, no, let's do it all with a sales tax. We looked at this and said, let's do this with a balanced approach. You don't want to hammer one group over another. An increase in the income tax is an increase on productivity and on small business in Pennsylvania. Why would you want to hammer them with that? We said, let's balance it and try to do it roughly 50-50 sales tax, income tax. Now, this is what I said about a small bit of property tax remaining. In previous versions of the bill, it called for replacing all school expenses from the state level. There was a huge outcry from people who lived in frugal school districts, those where the school board had been really good about their spending, didn't have a whole lot of debt. They said, why should we be paying for high rate and large debt in other school districts that we didn't incur? Most commonly mentioned was Philadelphia. They carry a tremendous amount of debt. And I think those people were right with what they said. Why should those in frugal school districts have to pay at the state level to pay off debts in high-spending school districts? We considered that for a long time, and there was two good points to doing what we decided on. First of all, to finance school district debt payments from the state level would have required another $2.3 billion, which means either higher sales tax or higher income tax rate, and that wasn't going to happen. But second, let's leave the debt with the school districts. Statewide, on average, debt service accounts for 10% of a school district's budget. The high we found was about 18%. That was only in one school district. On average, it's about 10%, which means year 2 of HB 1776, 90% of your property taxes go away. The 10% remains to meet debt service, and as soon as that is paid off, the remainder goes away. The school districts can only finance through the property tax debts on the book as of December 31st, 2011. That means the school districts can't load up on debt in anticipation of this thing passing. The deadline's already passed for it. They cannot add any new property taxes. They cannot change that property tax rate, only what is necessary to make the debt payment. And they can add no new debt financed by property taxes. So it's locked down. There are some who have objected to it. I think it's one of the best provisions of the bill. And in fact, when I testified at the HB 1776 hearing a couple of weeks ago, the chairman of the Finance Committee, Kerry Benninghoff, said to me, this was something that was a big problem for many members. I'm glad you pointed it out, because this is going to make the bill much more acceptable to us. Go ahead. All the replacement revenue will be placed in a lockbox account. And I get groans every time I say that, because we know what has happened to the Social Security Trust Fund. It's the best you can do. The bill mandates that every school district is to be at least level funded every year. So you put the money in a lockbox account. If the legislature tries to raid it in the future, okay, they're still obligated to give at least level funding to the school district. So if they pull it out of here, they're going to have to find it someplace else. And any fund balance that accrues, and it's possible that over time, more money will accrue than is necessary to replace the property taxes to the school district. If that happens, the fund balance comes up to exceeds 6%, the plan mandates a reduction in the income tax, so to get it back to balance again. The funding to the school districts. All school districts are initially funded fully at their property tax level now. In other words, if a school district loses $10 million in property taxes through this bill, they will be reimbursed $10 million from the state. It's a dollar-for-dollar replacement. The replacement mechanism or funding formula has always been a bone of contention with this bill, and again, this was a decision made to make it as palatable as possible. This is a property tax elimination measure or replacement measure only, which means every school district gets every dollar back that they lost in property taxes. That was the simplest way to do it. The annual increases to the schools are based on inflation, either one of two measures: the increase in the Consumer Price Index, which is a measure of inflation, or available revenue, whichever is less. So if the CPI in a given year is 2%, every school district gets a 2% increase in their funding. End of story. No silly funding formulas like we have right now. Go ahead. I mentioned they're going to have one more ability to tax, and during the discussions on this, we said we can't leave school districts twisting in the wind. There are going to be legitimate needs that they've got to finance. Best example, a growing school district may need a new school. It's going to be tough to finance that when they're on a budget. We said, how do we give them the ability to do this? They will be allowed to enact a local earned income tax, but by voter referendum only. If it's for a specific project, like a new school or a swimming pool or AstroTurf football fields, they've got to tell you what the purpose of what the project is, what its purpose is, how much it's going to cost, the tax rate to be imposed, and a sunset date for the tax. If they can justify to the voters that this money is necessary and the voters approve it, they'll get their earned income tax, but they've got to be able to justify it. At least this gives the residents, the taxpayers, a choice in whether or not they want to approve such a tax. There are no exceptions to it whatsoever. Unlike the current Act 1, there's no exceptions. The voters don't approve it, they don't get the money. The school districts can, if they wish, use it for ongoing expenses, if they can justify it and if it's approved. But if it's for ongoing expenses and not for a specific project, it has to be renewed by referendum every 4 years. Okay, go ahead, Janice. Said from the beginning, Sam Rohr's bill combined the basic education subsidy and this into one big pot and drove it out. We said, how can we simplify that? Because the legislative and executive branches don't like that. They like to meddle in the school district funding, and we've seen it. School districts from our area of the state contribute the money, they drive it to Philadelphia, they drive it to Pittsburgh, they drive it to Scranton. The distribution is unequal. The legislators are going to fight this. We said, okay, let's keep the two separate. Basic education funding formula continues as it is right now. We won't even get close to it. Let the legislators play in that sandbox if they want to. This bill is only for replacement of property taxes, period. And anything that can be enacted by statute can be changed by statute, and we know that. There's concurrent legislation calling for a constitutional amendment to forever forbid property taxes from being used to finance public education in Pennsylvania. Now, while the bill itself can take effect in 2 years from the date it's completely in 2 years from the date it's signed, constitutional amendment is a 2, 3, 4-year process. That's going to just follow on the heels of it. But I'm betting once this bill takes effect and people see what it does to their property taxes, that constitutional amendment is going to breeze past the referendum. Go ahead, Janice. Throughout the entire process of crafting this bill, let me go back to the Sam Rohr bill again. There was always the complaint that the numbers don't work. And in fact, Representative Phyllis Mundy from Luzerne County said this again at the HB 1776 hearing last Monday, and she was lying through her teeth. She said it came up $3.5 billion short, and we know that's not the truth. From the very get-go, every month, Jim Cox got new numbers from the House Appropriations Committee, and the bill was constantly readjusted to make sure the numbers were always in sync. We need $12.7 billion. This generates $12.7 billion. If anyone says that the numbers don't work, they're either misinformed or they're lying. We know the numbers are right on the nose. What I'd like to do tonight A number of legislators have said this to me. The ones who really believe in this bill, who really want to work for it, has said to me, we're not going to get this done without grassroots support. This has been a grassroots bill from the get-go. We're going to need the support to get it to the legislature, and that number, that magic number of 10, is absolutely correct. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. If you have folks in other areas of the state, let them know about this. Send them to the website, there's the web address, and there's handouts over there on that table summarizing what I talked about tonight. You can also sign up for the PTCC email updates over there and just give me your email address, nothing else. Don't want names, addresses, or anything else. But spread the word as widely as you can. Contact your senators and your representatives. Let them know this is what you want. If you agree with what you heard tonight, then let them know that, and let's get this through. We've been told already, we're pretty sure the bill is going to come out of the Finance Committee. It's going to be voted on this coming Monday. But I have been given information from how the special interests, the Pennsylvania Bar Association, Pennsylvania Retailers Association, National Federation of Independent Businesses, the Pennsylvania Tavern Owners Association, for goodness sakes, Pennsylvania Newspaper Association are opposing the bill. They have asked members of the House Finance Committee to table the bill until further notice. The special interests have already come crawling out of their holes to oppose this bill. And we literally are at war over this. It's us, the taxpayers and the grassroots, against the special interests who control most of the legislation that comes out of Harrisburg. And we need your support if we're going to get this done. I'm going to run through one more thing very quickly. 10 reasons to eliminate the property tax. This sounds like a David Letterman thing. First of all, achieve true home ownership. This doesn't completely do it because county and municipal taxes stick around, but the school property tax is anywhere from 2/3 to 3/4 of your total property tax bill. This is a big chunk of it. You never really own your home as long as it can be taken from you for not paying your property tax. You're just paying rent to the government under threat of eviction. Stabilize school funding. We've already talked about that. I don't have to go any further with it. This gives us a stable, equitable stream of revenue for K-12 education. Help prevent foreclosures. Sometimes when I bring this up, people say, well, there are some people who bought too much house and they can't afford it, so too bad. Well, okay, you want to take that attitude, that's fine, but every time a house is foreclosed, it hurts the housing market, it hurts the community, and it's better to keep these people in their homes, whether they bought too much home or not. It's better to keep them in their homes than have the home foreclosed. By eliminating that monthly property tax escrow, which in some places in the state is equivalent to the mortgage payment, a lot more people would be able to stay in their homes. Restore plummeting real estate values. Because of excessively high property taxes, homes in some areas of Pennsylvania have sharply declined in value. They become almost impossible to sell. Eliminating the property tax restores value to the home, and the best example of this, I'm going to go back to Monroe County again that I mentioned earlier. Monroe County, a home in the market for $200,000. $200,000 is the current median home sale price in Pennsylvania. A home in the market for $200,000 in Monroe County right now has a property tax load of anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 a year. They have 3,000 homes sitting idle in Monroe County right now from walkaways. People who couldn't afford it and just let the equity go and walked away from the house. They're not generating property tax revenue, but besides that, their housing market is in the toilet. You can't give away a house in Monroe County with a $10,000 property tax bill. This gets rid of that problem of killing the housing market. Pardon me. Boost the sagging housing market. Eliminating the property tax escrow is going to make housing much more affordable. Pardon me. A few years ago, our son and his wife wanted to get out of rent, move into a house. They looked at a modest place. The mortgage was going to be in the order of about $600 a month. No problem for them because that's what they were paying in rent anyway. Then they found out the monthly tax escrow was going to be in excess of $400 a month. Killed the deal. They eventually were able to buy a house. But that's not the point. With that property tax escrow, again, in some areas of the state can equal the amount of the mortgage payment. You get rid of that. How many more people could afford to buy a home in Pennsylvania? Realtors and the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors have told us, you get rid of that monthly property tax escrow, the housing market in Pennsylvania is going to explode. Go ahead. Attract business to Pennsylvania. We've already talked about that. Many business owners have stated that the savings gained by the elimination of the school property tax would enable them to hire more employees. I've heard the complaints about, oh, this is going to help Walmart, and it's going to help Exxon and all the big companies. Maybe so. 80% of all non-government jobs in Pennsylvania are provided by small businesses, not the big corporations, and these small businesses don't get a break. Property tax is the second largest fixed cost for most small businesses. In fact, I just got an email from a fellow here in York County. A few years ago, he opened a truck servicing business. He employs about 6 people right now. He's doing well, was looking to open a second branch, which again would have employed 5 to 6 people. The monthly rent on the property was about $2,000. He was fine with that, then found out from his lawyer the property tax was $23,000 a year. He said, I'm not opening that second branch. I'm opening it in Maryland instead. A lot of businesses are doing this, and we could help small businesses tremendously by getting rid of the school property tax. Create jobs for Pennsylvanians, well, that goes hand in hand with small business. If small businesses can expand and grow, they're going to hire. Right now, because of the uncertainty of the property tax, they're afraid to do that. They don't know what's coming in the next few years, and they're holding back the money. If get rid of it, they're going to be more than willing to hire new people. Create a massive stimulus for Pennsylvania. Of the $12.7 billion paid in property taxes, $10 billion of that is paid by homeowners. If your property tax is eliminated right now, you have a $3,000 school property tax bill, what are you going to do with that money you're laying out right now in property taxes? You're going to save some of it, you're going to spend some of it, but think about releasing $10 billion into Pennsylvania's economy. Yeah, I mean, it's taking out of one pocket and putting it in another, but still, that's going to be given to you as a homeowner to spend as you wish. The federal government borrows to give us stimulus. This is a stimulus that's homegrown and doesn't cost us a penny. Just get rid of the property tax. Increase personal wealth. That happens because the value of your home is going to increase, but also because you're going to be able to save more money that you might not have been able to do with the current property tax. And finally, stop costly reassessments. Now, it's true this doesn't end the property tax, again because of county and municipal, but most school property tax, most property reassessments are driven by the school property tax. Getting rid of this is going to pretty much end it. By the way, countywide reassessment on average $10 million, which means every time you reassess, you're paying for it through increased county property taxes. Let's get rid of that system. I already told you this, it's a clean bill. We've been involved from the get-go on this, and there is nothing in this, unlike most Harrisburg legislation, there's nothing in it that benefits the special interests or any politicians. This is strictly for the benefit of Pennsylvania taxpayers and school children. I often get this, well, I hope they'll do something about it, or good luck, I hope you can get it done. I can't get anything done. Those people in Harrisburg aren't going to do anything. The magic number. We have to get involved if we're going to get it done. And that's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. We need to enlist you. We need you to get behind this bill and do as much as you can to support it and help us to get it enacted, and we got to get it done now. That's self-explanatory. Go ahead, Janice. I just stuck this in here because I was pretty amused by it. We had the rally in the Capitol on May 7th. The Pottstown Mercury, the artist from Pottstown Mercury, did this cartoon, and I was just amused by it. So I stuck it into the slide presentation because I thought you might be too. Down here on the right, we have the Pennsylvania Coalition of Taxpayer Associations. You see the signs up at the upper right, and we're declaring our independence from property tax, which, by the way, was the rally. We declared our independence from property taxes. And on the throne, we have Governor Corbett, and the jester is the legislature. I thought it was a cute cartoon. Go ahead. Well, that's it. Any questions?
Hey, David. Could you tell us who in York County are co-sponsors of 1776 and who are co-sponsors of 2230?
I'm sorry, I thought about this on the way over and thought I should have brought the co-sponsor list for 2230. I'm pretty sure all the York County reps are on 2230.
So out of there's how many co-sponsors on 2230?
30.
So 5 of the 30 are from York?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that Eugene D. Pasquale is on it. I don't think he is either, but all the other York County reps are, and I think more than anything else, that was a show of solidarity with Representative Grove.
And how many of them are on 1776?
All of them except for Representative Grove and Representative Di Pasquale. All the York County representatives are on 1776, and I think that's partially because of the pressure they were feeling from the taxpayers. They didn't have much of a choice. May I get blunt for a moment?
Can you do what?
May I be blunt for a moment?
Well, you haven't been at all tonight.
Not necessarily all of the York County representatives who are on the bill support the bill. I think some of them were pushed into it. Well, I can't speak about most of them, but I know. Pardon? No, I'm sorry. 1776. 1776. Stan Saylor spoke to one of our groups a few weeks ago, the Southeastern Tax Reform Coalition, about 1776, and I believe he mentioned 2230 at the same time. Margie Lavin is one of the leaders of the group, and when Representative Saylor got there, he said, you know, there are some things in 1776 you're not going to like. You may be surprised by it. And Margie said, are you talking about the retained property tax provision? And Stan didn't know what to say. But the point of it was, he's a co-sponsor, but he's not really a champion for the bill. And sort of subtly works against the bill when he has the opportunity. And I think that's partially because of his position in leadership. He's the House Majority Whip, and I think he's sort of dancing to the tune that the leadership is playing for him. I would rather see Stan be a much stronger supporter of this legislation rather than just putting in FaceTime at rallies and press conferences and saying he supports the bill. Excuse me for being blunt.
It's okay.
Pardon? He just gives the bill little digs and knocks when he has the opportunity. He doesn't come out in full opposition to it. He can't do that. He signed on to it. But, oh, and he was talking about that. He was going to tell her all about the retained property tax provision of the bill, and she just absolutely short-circuited him by saying, is that what you're talking about? And he didn't know how to answer. He thought he was going to surprise her and make the bill look negative. Margie knew all about it. She's a smart cookie. But the point of it is, he was trying to subtly discredit the bill.
David, on Gary Sutton's show, Seth said on Friday that one of the reasons that he would not, that 1776 is not a good bill is that if we raise our sales tax on things that are not taxed now, that people from Maryland and adjoining states would not come into Pennsylvania to buy untaxed items.
I think that's a straw man argument, and the increase to 7% has also been mentioned for the same reason. Look, Maryland has a 6% sales tax. We're talking about going to 7. Are people really going to spend the gas to go across the border to save 1% on the sales tax? And on the newly taxed items, first of all, they're not going to do it on the food bill for certain. And for clothing, maybe for the few items that are taxed at more than $50, I don't see that as an issue. And again, I think that's a straw man argument.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
David, what I have not heard in your presentation are the various school board increases for being held captive by the Pennsylvania teachers unions. I know in Spring Grove, and it may have been 4 years already, they came out with an article in the newspaper that said, oh my, there's just nothing we could do. We had to give the teachers a 4.3% raise every year for 4 years. And if that's going to continue, then the tax is also going to continue, correct?
No. The school board loses all taxing ability.
Then what do the unions do?
Well, this is the point of the whole thing. The Chamonix School District in Bucks County is going through this right now. Their teachers have been without a contract for 3 years. Right now they're on strike for the second time this school year, and they have struck all 3 years. The average teacher, the highest paid teacher in the Chamonix is about $125,000 a year, and they want fully paid benefits, no contribution by the teachers at all. That's why they're not giving in. That's a school board with some gumption, thank you. But in most cases, you have school boards who are inexperienced negotiators. They don't know how to handle the high-powered negotiators that the PSEA sends in to negotiate with them. And as soon as the PSEA says strike, they start to cower in fear and say, okay, we don't want to strike, we'll give you what you want, and we'll just raise property taxes. They can't do that anymore. They're going to have to learn how to be stronger negotiators, aren't they? Just like the rest of us, they're going to be on a budget. School boards work backwards from the rest of us. They decide what they're going to spend and then taxes to pay for it. The rest of us have a budget we work within, and then we decide how we're going to spend it. Totally the opposite. The school boards are suddenly going to be confined to a budget. They're going to have to learn how to negotiate, aren't they? And you're not going to get any more than 4%, 5%, and 6% increases annually when they can't afford to do it because, and the teachers union loses its argument. And the teachers union knows at this point that the school board can raise property taxes to finance these contracts. They don't have that argument anymore. Now if they want to fight for it, it's going to come out of program cuts. It's going to make the teachers look like the bad guys, isn't it? We're going to cut this program because you want a 5% increase in your salary? I don't think that's going to happen. This is going to change the entire dynamic between the school boards and the teachers union. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, sir. Where are we?
Yes. It's often said that when people get into those positions in the government, they kind of develop an ivory tower attitude. And you've certainly touched on a number of nitty-gritty issues, but it's very clear, and maybe some of the legislators would be receptive to being reminded of some of these nitty-gritty issues. The system is now in crisis because look what's happening in York. The people can't afford the taxes.
Yep.
And this first bill that's been proposed isn't going to help that. And secondly, these schools are just money pits, and they're creators of social problems, and which leads into other issues, of course. But how many people in the legislature, for example, don't have children who are touched by drug problems and so forth? In Southwestern School District, the property taxes are going up and up and up, and I have a very good authority that the drug problem is terrible. So we're spending all this money and getting no results. And of course, they may never say something publicly, but some of them might be receptive to being reminded of these realities.
You're right, and I think the effect of this going forward, Dr. Fike at the rally, I mentioned her before, Dr. Fike said something that school boards have lost the ability to distinguish between necessities and luxuries. I think going forward, this is going to drive that conversation differently, and they're going to look more closely at what they're spending. In my school district, how's $100,000 for a weight room? How's $500,000 for a tennis complex that is no more than a quarter of a mile from the public tennis courts? And AstroTurf, not just the football field, but every one of the athletic fields, including the lacrosse field in the school district. Are these necessities? Do they add anything to educational value? And I think now that we put them on a budget, they're going to have to look more closely. Let's get back to the basics and worry about giving our children a good, solid, basic education and not trying to be everything to anybody. Jim Rodkey from the Lebanon 912 group said that there was a woman in their school district demanded that the school board give her children ballet lessons. Absolutely the truth. School districts can no longer do that sort of thing. Let's get back to the basics. Go ahead, Scott. Yes, sir.
The gentleman over here touched on the teachers' unions, but there's another question represented by the unfunded liability for the pensions in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And some school districts, many school districts have done a better job of funding those pensions than others have done. Seems to me with that pension liability and the intractability of the unions to go to a new way of financing their benefits, how does that keep the wheels from coming off of all of this?
This is what we're hoping will be, I want to say an unintended consequence. It's an unintended intended consequence. Who created the PSERS problem? The legislature. Who's paying for it? The local school districts. They did it and drove the costs down to the local taxpayers with property taxes. School boards aren't going to be able to afford this. And hopefully, this is going to drive the problem right back up where it belongs to the legislature. Stop imposing this on us. You made the problem, you fixed the problem, because the school boards aren't going to be able to afford it anymore. Go ahead.
Which is why they're not going to pass it.
We'll see.
A couple comments. One of which I totally agree what you said about Seth Grow. I personally think Seth has his pocket in the back, his hand in the back of the teachers union's pocket, because during the election, there was a forum that he was at, and I found it awfully odd that he never even brought up his bill. My other comment, if anybody in here is in Miller's district, because I am, I spoke to Miller because I was really upset when I get an email from the Central Penn Business Journal when they announced that he had this bill he was announcing. I was furious. And I'm stomping around the house, and so I called because I wanted to know what happened to 1776. And so I called Miller's office. He wasn't there. She said, do you want me to have him call? Yes. Then I talked to Cox's office, who couldn't have been nicer. But Miller called me back that afternoon. I'll tell you, he was about the most arrogant person I have ever spoke to.
Ron Miller.
Ron Miller. I told him that I had sent emails all around to everybody, who then they told me they sent emails, and I was posting things wherever I went. And he basically said that I was talking to the choir, because all of the York County reps and senators have always wanted this gone. He was stuttered. He was condescending. He never once thanked me. Told me basically I was wasting my time with these people because it was other counties that there was a problem with. But I have the same feeling with him, is that he doesn't want this bill either, because I know he has his hands in the union's pockets.
Okay, I can't comment on that. I've only met Ron Miller once. I have not had much interaction with him, so I can't comment on it.
Well,
All I know is he's on
told
both
me
bills.
he didn't know anything about your bill, and I've been told that was rubbish, because yes, he did. He said he couldn't comment on it because he hadn't seen it in front of him. He didn't know anything about it.
I have seen the memos that Representative Cox sent repeatedly over the past year to members of the House of Representatives asking for their input. It has been an ongoing conversation with members of the House of Representatives. I can only say that about that. Representative Miller, had he wanted to get the information, would have had it readily available, which is something else Representative Grove did before the bill was introduced. We've been talking about this bill for a long time. I've been giving this presentation for over a year based on the principles that I showed you tonight, even though the legislation hadn't been out yet. And every time someone asked Representative Grove about the bill, he'd hold up a sheet of paper and say, this is a blank sheet of paper. That's what you get when you search for the bill. He knew darn well what was in the bill, but kept saying, all you got's a blank sheet of paper until it was introduced. Hey, now it's introduced, he's silent. Can't use that excuse anymore. Again, trying to downplay, but I'm sorry, I can't really comment on Representative Miller, because I just don't know him that well.
I'd like to comment on that because I asked for a raise of hands for Seth Grove, who is Seth Grove's constituents. But if you're in York County or wherever you live, whoever your legislator is, call them and write them a letter about this property tax issue. Ron Miller is exactly as you described him. He's that way on right to work. He's that way on a number of issues. He's very condescending, and it's just how he is. But you have to put pressure on him. Remember that magic number, 10. Remember that magic number? One more comment. Up on the sales table, we have 2 letters. One letter is a letter that Seth Grove wrote to a gentleman who asked him about House Bill 1776. It's 5 pages long, his response to House Bill 1776. And then the other letter is a rebuttal from that gentleman to Seth. And we have a number of copies up there. Please take those with you so you can take a look at them.
There's a gentleman up front here who's had a question. I keep going off to the sides and forget him. So we're gonna get to you, sir.
Okay, you're saying that the school boards can ask for a rate increase if they want to build a new school. Are they going to be controlled as to what for school they can build, not another central?
No, they're not. And this is something, yes, I agree with you. I think we should use standardized plans, not let them build these Taj Mahals with imported marble foyers and that kind of stuff. That's nonsense. I think we should go to standardized plans, but this is something we didn't want to include in the bill. Every time you tack on another Christmas tree ornament, you kill the chances of getting the bill enacted. So yes, I agree with you. No, there's nothing to stop them from doing that, except the taxpayers themselves. If the taxpayers see a $50 million school when a $30 million school is appropriate, shoot it down. That's simple. School boards have to justify it. Wow, a lot of questions.
Is anyone aware that just recently, within the last, probably approaching 2 years, I think it was either York City or York County, tried to accelerate the ability to foreclose on homes from, you know what I'm talking about?
I'm pretty sure I do, yes.
We're right in the middle of this economic turmoil everyone's facing right now, the economy as it is. And what do? They initiate some kind of a bill or legislation, I don't know if it was locally in York City or if it was York County wide, to give them the ability to expedite the sheriff's sale process to seize our homes if we run on hard times.
It normally takes it normally takes 2 years. You have to be in arrears for 2 years before they can seize your house. But yes, and I can't give you details, but yes, I heard something similar that they want to accelerate the process and take the homes off, evict people. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
And maybe you mentioned this in the bill, but is there anything in the bill that would tie the 4% income tax and the 7% sales tax to like the rate of inflation?
Actually, this, if you remember, I mentioned that the increases to the schools are based either on the increase in the CPI or available revenue. There is no reason for the income tax or the sales tax to ever have to be increased again, because the distribution to the schools calls for money in, money out. If those two taxes at that level, 4.01 on the income tax, 7% on the sales tax, whatever money that generates, it's what gets driven out to the schools. So there will be no increases past the point of the amount of money available.
Okay. The reason why I was wondering, like with pensions, which some of them have already mentioned here, I work for a huge international medical device manufacturer. For 17 years, we've made more money each year than we made the year before. However, we pay like $400 a month for our benefits. Our pension's been cut by 40%, even though financing isn't an issue. None of us are complaining. We can always get a job elsewhere if we want to. Sure. If you apply that in the educational arena, of course, they don't want to pay a nickel for their benefits. They don't want their pension cut. Yep. If they have their way and Pennsylvania is obligated to somehow meet the financial side of the pension, then sooner or later, unless that's addressed, and I know that's outside of the scope of this bill, but sooner or later we're going to be levied with a sizable tax.
Well, and again, it will not,
and that's why I was wondering if it could be raised here.
It will not happen through this mechanism. Okay. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen through the basic education funding formula. That's still in place. That's the one that doesn't specify how much is injected into it each year. That's been all the complaint right now about Governor Corbett wanting to underfund it, which, by the way, is not true, but that's not the point. The basic education funding formula has a lot of flexibility. This does not.
Okay.
These numbers are locked, and there's no increase in the income tax or the sales tax. It's definitely revenue in, driven out, period. If that happens, it's going to happen in the BEFF.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You said that 10 was the magic number, and since it's going to be voted on Monday, in response to this lady back here, I'm in Ron Miller's area, would you recommend that we write a letter and hand deliver it tomorrow, or
No.
that we just call him?
No, the vote on Monday is to release the bill from the House Finance Committee to the floor of the House. That only affects, I think there's 25 people on the committee. We need 13 votes on the Finance Committee.
Any from York County on the Finance Committee? No.
Who are the reps? Grove, Miller, Saylor, Gillespie.
Perry.
No. There's no one from the York County delegation on the Finance Committee. So no, it's unnecessary to do anything about this. We're pretty sure the bill is going to come out of committee. We think we need 13 votes. We think we have 16 at this point. Unless the special interests really bear down hard on somebody, we're pretty sure it's coming out of the Finance Committee. Where we're going to need you to do it is when the bill hits the House floor, and we need the votes on the floor. We need 102, and that's when you have to start putting on the pressure to get these people to vote for the bill on the House floor. The vote on Monday is really not a problem. Don't know. That's up to the House Majority Leadership. In this case, the floor leader is Mike Turzai. I'm guessing that Turzai is not really fond of this idea, never has been. And it's also going to take some pressure on Turzai to make sure this bill gets run and run quickly. We can't afford to wait till the fall. End of June comes, we're out of luck. Because we try to do it end of September, early October, there's not enough time to get it done. We're going to have to try to pressure Turzai as much as we can to make sure he runs the bill. I think they're going to, for a couple of reasons. There are quite a number of Republican representatives who have run on the issue of property taxes and have promised their constituents they will do something about it. Seth Grove's bill has been out of committee for a number of weeks now, and it hasn't been touched. I'm guessing, I don't know this, I'm guessing they're holding any kind of action on 2230 until 1776 is also out, and then they'll run them at the same time. But I think it's very unlikely that no property tax legislation will be run this time. They've got to do something because the Republicans want to keep the majority in the House come this fall. And they stand a chance. There's some really touchy districts. They stand a chance of losing that majority if these representatives aren't able to carry through on their promise of property taxes. Tara Toohill in Luzerne County took out Todd Eaches, the majority leader, in a heavily Democratic district. Rick Saccone took out David Lebdansky in the 39th in Western Pennsylvania. They're in jeopardy. And if they don't follow through on this, they're going to lose their seats. So yes, I think something will be done, and there's only two bills out there, 2230 and 1776. Darrell Metcalf introduced one. That's just absolutely ridiculous. I have no idea where he's coming from with it. I'm not even going to get into it. But those are the only two bills, so something should happen. You're waiting, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's encouraging that so many people have taken an interest and are asking very good questions of you.
You bet.
But here we have people who have called their representatives and gotten stonewalled and treated rather shabbily, and we all know how entrenched the PSEA are with our legislators. They're the best that can be bought, and my question is, with PSEA, Pennsylvania School Boards, all these other organizations that you cited by chapter and verse against this bill, how in the world do you expect to get this thing passed?
That's what I said to you earlier. We're at war. It's the taxpayers against the special interests, and you know what? The legislators understand that we have the power of the voting booth. They can take the money from the special interests for their campaign funds, but that's not going to do them a bit of good if the voters are against them in the voting booth. And we have to make that quite obvious to them, the ones at least who have November opponents. You don't vote for this, you're taking a big risk on your job next year.
Well, I hope
I think we have a chance of getting it done. But you mentioned the PSEA, and let me make a comment on that. There have been 2 hearings on House Bill 1776 now. Each hearing had 6 testifiers. PSEA wasn't one of them. I would have expected if they were going to come out...
The others were bought and paid for by PSEA.
Well, possibly. But I would have thought they would have come out pretty strongly against this, and they didn't. Consider this for a second. I'm going to refer back to the Reading School District again, because I'm very familiar with what's going on there. Yesterday, they announced the layoff of 110 teachers. It looks like it's going to go as deep as 170, all because of the school funding crisis. Now, the PSEA can look at this in one of 2 ways. They can either lose the ability to go for 4% and 5% and 6% salary increases this year, or they can keep losing members in layoffs like this. If they're smart, I think they want to protect members' jobs before they want to protect the exorbitant raises. And I'm kind of thinking maybe that's why the PSEA has not said a whole lot about it yet. Is it better to have 100 members at $10 a head or have 50 members at $10 a head? And I think they're smart enough to know that.
Well, we have a new budget being crafted by the House at the present time based on this additional revenue that is supposedly available. But all of that's got to be done by June the 30th, does it not?
Yes, it does, by law. But
therefore, we've got a very small window if you want to try and get this passed. And I would hope you and all of your colleagues keep all of us energized so that living as close as we do to the Capitol steps, you get us up there en masse every day if necessary. They don't meet every day. Monday and Tuesday, maybe.
Hey,
Thank you.
It's a shame if you missed the rally. Representative Tom Calderon, a Reading Democrat who strongly supports the bill, said he has never seen anything like it in the Capitol Rotunda. He guessed the attendance at over 1,000 people. It was monstrous. But yes, I want to keep you informed, and if you're not on the email list, please sign up for it before you go. That's the best way.
David,
Scott.
we're going to have 3 more questions.
Okay.
And then we're going to end it over here and then 2 back here.
Yes, sir.
David, what do you think personally Corbett leans to? Is he just being non-committal, non-verbal about this whole thing? Or
About
does he
this?
have about 1776, the elimination of property tax?
Okay, I'll
and
tell you.
then, And then, do you know a gentleman by Michael Wood?
Oh, yeah. I know about him. I saw him testify.
Yeah. He's the one that suggested that we not do this 1776, but give the elderly a deferred tax appropriation. In other words, if you're over 60, I guess, you don't pay the tax until you're dead.
Put a
they
lien against your house.
Right. Then
Yeah.
they take the house.
Yeah. Well, he's also the one who gave a statistic. He said, well, let's see, there's 3.2 million homeowners in Pennsylvania, and about 10,000 Pennsylvanians a year lose their home to property tax sales. So that's less than 0.2%. So that's a statistical error. We can just leave that alone. I'm sorry, 1 is too many.
Yeah, this is the kind of people that are running the government.
Well, Michael Wood, he works for, I wish I had it in front of me. He was testifying on behalf of one organization which really is owned by a different organization. And if you look at that organization's makeup of the board of directors, Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center is actually a subsidiary of another group. From their website, you can call that up and find out what the other group is. Look at their board of directors. I think there were 2 members of the board of directors from the SEIU, a couple from the PSEA, a couple from the American Federation of Teachers. Better than half the board are union representation. So you know where he's coming from. No question. He was so callous during that testimony, he absolutely infuriated me when I watched it. In regard to Governor Corbett, Joel Sears and I met with the governor before he was the governor, during the campaign. Talked to him about what was then the Rohrer bill. It was interesting. In fact, we met with Dan Honorado, too. But it was interesting because he sort of paid attention, although he had 2 of his aides there who asked most of the questions and did most of the talking. But he did say at the end of the meeting, we met with him for about 90 minutes, he did say that, yes, he was interested. Since then, I have talked to Jen Branstetter twice. Jen Branstetter is his policy person. Both times she has said that if the bill is financially viable, is tax revenue neutral, and reaches his desk, he will sign the bill. Now, Corbett himself didn't say that. Jen Branstetter said it. But I still think it's a hopeful sign. Came from her twice. Someone else told me a few weeks ago they also heard him say it too, that he would sign the bill under those circumstances. So that's where we stand with Corbett. I really wish he would take a leadership position on it, though, which he has refused to do. Scott. Okay.
I would like to make a comment about the school teachers. I'm married to a former school teacher of 41 years service. My wife has continuously complained about the fact that her school district and a lot of other school districts never paid the money that they were supposed to put into the retirement fund.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing today with all the complaints is the fact that our school boards did not pay in the money into the retirement program, and the government or the state or however never forced them to pay. If they didn't want to pay, they didn't pay.
The government allowed them to do that.
Yes.
When back in the early 2000s, the government said you don't have to meet your obligations anymore.
Well, that's unfortunately that happened. Now, I also want to make it very clear that my wife was a central person, and she always paid in her share of the retirement program, which we're benefiting now. And we also paid, I'm self-employed, so she paid my insurance, my health insurance to the school district. And I know most of the other teachers in Central were paying their health insurance. I get a lot of, I hear a lot of, well, the teachers didn't do, or the unions. In my wife's school district, the employees, the teachers, paid their dues as far as health insurance and the retirement funds. The school board failed.
Yeah.
It isn't all the teachers' faults.
No, I agree with you, and I don't necessarily blame the teachers.
Well,
I mean, like in any
people, and you've done it. There's a very broad brush.
You're right.
Applied.
You're right.
It isn't exactly fair. I know things are, okay, the mellow bill and the change in the percentage. We benefited, my wife and I, but she always paid her fair share.
And I didn't wish to be insulting. I am sorry if I insulted you.
But no, you didn't insult me. It's just that people here don't hear from somebody who's been with that. My wife was a very dedicated teacher, 41 years, over 1,200 students, and she worked her butt off from 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night every day. And some teachers do that.
No, you're
but
right.
I had a very dedicated woman.
Thank you. Scott, you have one more?
One more.
This is an easy one. Are there any banners for the yards and bumper stickers available, that type of thing?
Nothing has been done about that, and I'm sorry. We really should have. Scott, you want to take it on as a project?
Well, you're telling us we have until the end of June. The clock is running right now.
Drop me an email at the PA taxpayer's address. It's on the website.
Okay.
Because I know there was a group in Luzerne County that had a whole bunch of them printed up, yard signs, and I think they have some left. So maybe we can do something about that and get them out.
Actually, Bill Bishop actually prints bumper stickers and signs. I want to say thank you, David.
You're very
Appreciate it. Sorry we ran late, but this is a very important issue. The gauntlet is laid down. We need to get this legislation passed, and it's up to us to do it. So please contact your legislators. I have something else to say, but I'll say it after Bill.
Somebody just said that there's a Jetta out there with its lights on, HHJ 9771. So hopefully your battery's not dead.
If the lights are still on, it's not dead. David, thank you again. I appreciate you coming out. I'm sure David will be here to answer any questions if you'd like afterwards. Now, also, I want to tell everybody, thank you for coming out. This is going to be our last meeting basically until September. We have a members-only meeting next month, and we have a picnic that everybody's invited to in August. And I want to thank you for all your donations and all your support for the group, because we could not do it without your donations. The donations go towards advertising, meeting space, the bus trips that we do. We charge a certain amount for bus trips, and it goes towards buying merchandise so we can build up more donations. And we actually have new merchandise back there. If you want to take a look at it, there's 4 pamphlets back there. One is 10 Reasons to Abolish the UN, Occupy Wall Street, The Communist Movement Reborn, Rules for Revolution on the Saul Alinsky, and then From Shadow Party to Shadow Government. These are all interesting reads. They're really quick. They're only $2. You can read them, pass them on. We have license plates back there. Don't tread on me license plates. We have flags, hats, whatever. You know what we got back there. My beautiful daughter, Abby, is here to help you at the sales desk. She came all this way and spent all this time listening to this very interesting material for a 12-year-old, and she would be happy to help you back there. Thank you very much. Have a great July 4th. And if you have any questions, go on the website. Thank you again.